Attention, bobsled riders! You will soon be embarking on a thrilling podcast down the icy slopes of the Matterhorn. So please remain seated, keeping your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the bobsled at all times. Auf Wiedersehen! Hello, yodelers. We are the Matterhorn Yodelers. I am your host today, Peter, with my co-host
Jackie.
And back again is our guest host.
Guest ghost?
Guest ghost host.
Almost ghost.
Ghost host.
Father yodeler.
Man, I cannot talk today.
That's bad for being on a podcast.
I
It's
know,
all right.
right?
You only have to bring us home, right?
Right.
You're
Right.
bringing us home, so.
Give me time to warm up here. But today we're going back on Main Street. We're going to go look at some more windows. That's right. So meet me down on Main Street. Love that song. But yeah, we're going to go look at some windows and who these people are that are on the windows at the Disney parks and talk a little bit about them so that you know a little bit about the people behind the magic that created.
And this is fun because they clean the windows regularly, so they look really nice.
They do.
Yes.
They do a fantastic job. Even the ones you wouldn't expect them to really clean, they do a good job.
They do. They look great.
Yeah.
So, for those who do not know, the windows on Main Street are kind of like the credits for the Disney theme parks. It's basically the people who created, maybe they were an Imagineer or a songwriter or a performer or an executive, a CEO or whatever. Like, you contributed something to the Disney parks. And normally after you're retired or after you've passed on, Disney will give that person a honorary window on Main Street or other locations in the Disney theme parks around the world, not just at Disneyland, but Disney World, Paris, Tokyo, all over. Mm-hmm. They have it. So we're going to talk about a few of them because a lot of these people tend to get overlooked. Everyone likes to focus in on Walt Disney, but there were people beneath him that had major impacts on what we experience in the parks. So, Jackie, why don't you start us off? Who do you have?
I have the famous Imagineer Bob Gurr.
Oh, he's still around.
He is.
Yeah, I think I looked it up. He's like 91. I think he's one of the last.
He's one of the last few, for
think,
sure. Rolly Crump, he's still around.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not too many of the originals left.
But
Right.
you can see him on the Imagineering story.
Yes.
Yes.
Bob Gurr's there.
He's very, I would say pretty healthy for his age. And, he is... I watched an interview.
I think he still does tours at the Walt Disney Barn in L.A.
Yeah.
So...
So I watched an interview, and it was dated 7 years ago. And he's still such an energetic
Oh, he's a
guy.
Personality.
Yeah.
Such a big personality. I was like, wow, I can only imagine him when he was super young and just living the dream of oh, I'm building something new and creative.
All his pictures, he's got this great big smile.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And he loves jokes and just there was in the interview, it was at his house, and he has a ride vehicle of Mr. Toad.
I think I know what interview you're talking about because there's a YouTuber I watch. He was there at the interview. He didn't do the interviewing, but he was there when they recorded that interview.
Yeah.
And so that's when he met him for the first time, and they became friends and all that stuff. So.
Yeah, the fact that he's got ride vehicles.
Yeah, he's got
in
a
his
Mr.
house.
Toad vehicle or whatnot. Yeah.
Fun fact: he did not design the Mr. Toad ride vehicle,
No.
but he does have one in his house, which is fun. But yeah, so Bob Gurr, he was an Imagineer. So sorry, I lost notes here. So he what he's mainly known for are the ride vehicles.
Anything with wheels or a motor, he probably had his hands on it.
Yeah, and there's a quote that he says, "If it moves on wheels at Disneyland, I probably designed it." So how he started, he was born. Oh, I lost it. Oh, here we go. He was born October 25th, 1931. And he was born in Los Angeles. Growing up, he was always fascinated with tools, mechanicals, device, and cars. He graduated 1952 from the Art Center College of Design in Los Angeles. And he was hired by Ford Motor Company. But then fairly after, he started his own business and left them, which then his business was hired by WED, W-E-D, by Disney to design the vehicles for Autopia, which is fun. So that was his first like main project, and then Walt Disney was impressed with all of his skills and knowledge.
So you thank him for all your hurt backs and things like that. That's Bob Gurr for you. No.
Well, first they didn't have any tracks for those vehicles.
Right. It was a little more fun. Yeah, so Walt Disney was really impressed with his knowledge and invited him to join his team as an Imagineer. And then he was just dedicated on the design and construction of Disneyland, which I thought was interesting. So he graduated in 1952. What year did Disneyland open?
55.
55. So in that time, he worked at Ford for a little bit, started his own business, and then got on to Disney.
Became one of the lead Imagineers.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty quick. Within 3 years, gets a steady job. I mean, that's not common in today's time, graduating from college. Yeah, so some of the vehicles that he designed was Autopia, Matterhorn, the Main Street vehicles, the monorails. He worked on the Flying Saucer attraction, antique cars, the double-decker buses, the Ford Motor Magic Skyway
For the World's Fair.
for the World's Fair.
We talked about that on a prior episode, so go back and listen to that one.
Yeah, and he also worked on the Abraham Lincoln animatronic. Yeah.
A lot of mechanical parts in there.
Yes. 1981, he retired from Disney. And he started another new company with 2 former Imagineers. And that's when he worked on some attractions with Universal Hollywood, some animatronics with King Kong. And it's like a serpent dragon he worked on. He also created a UFO to fly over the 1984 LA Olympics. Do you remember that, Father Yoder?
I do remember that.
Yeah. So
That's Bob Gurr.
That's
Did
Bob
not
Gurr.
know that was Bob Gurr.
Yeah. And then he also consulted on the T-Rex for Jurassic Park. So it's kind of interesting. He did Disney for quite some time, but he wanted to go off and do his own thing.
Well, Disney, when he left, Disney was going through
Down.
a rough spot, kind of similar to what's happening right now. With some management shakeup and how they want to operate certain things. So yeah, he kind of left on his own accord because he could tell it was not the same company that it once was.
Yeah. And even after he retired, so unquote, he still was brought on certain projects to work on after 81 for certain things. In about 2008, he was honored a window above the clothing shop. It's and he so the shop the window says leading the race to the future. Meteor Cycle Company. Our vehicles pass the test of time. Fast faultless and fadless. And he says, he shared when he was receiving the window, the honorary. He goes, Bob shared that he had enjoyed many memorable days at Disneyland, including the opening day. And when he gave the vice president, Richard Nixon, the first trip on the monorail.
I was wondering if you were going to talk about that.
Yeah.
It's one of his favorite stories to share.
Yeah. So it was one of his favorite moments when he got to
Kidnap the vice president.
We'll tell the story then.
Okay.
I don't know all the details.
You don't know that? So basically, like, Vice President Nixon was there for the opening of the monorail. Him and his family gets into the monorail with Walt Disney. They closed the door and, off they went without the Secret Service agents. And apparently all the Secret Service agents were freaking out because they had no idea what was going on. That was not the plan. And so...
and it's not like you can hop on the monorail track and just run after it.
Right. And so they went around. Nixon's family all had a good time. They were all laughing. Nixon especially was laughing at the whole situation with the Secret Service. But, Bob Groh was definitely like, yeah, I don't know if I was going to get in trouble for that.
Yeah, he said... he loves that moment, but the day that he received his window is just frosting on the cake.
Yeah.
It's just so sweet because, getting that window is just such a big moment in anybody's, I would say in any Imagineer or anybody who's worked in the park to have the honorary mention. He mentioned in an interview, and he goes... because someone asked him, how was it, meeting Walt and being with Walt? And he's like, you don't meet Walt, you work with him. Because Walt was a dreamer constantly, and, it's my job to execute that dream. And I just love that, you don't meet Walt. That wasn't his personality. It was you get to work with Walt.
That's fun.
Yeah. That's a little bit about Bob Gurr.
And he's still alive.
He's still alive. He's still thriving.
At least as of the time of
Yeah.
that we've had a lot of bad luck when it comes to the timing of some of our podcasts, where it's the next day something happens. That's what happened with when Bob Chapek he got ousted the same day we recorded some episodes where I talked to I'm Bob Chapek, everyone.
Yeah. Our recordings are pre-recorded. If you didn't know.
So hopefully when this episode comes out, he's still around.
Yes.
What happened to Japheth the Yodeler? Didn't he used to work here?
He used to work here, but we decided, there were some offenses that took place, and so he's been backbenched for a little bit. We'll see.
Timeout.
He's on a timeout. We'll see if he comes back.
When you mess with a Yeti, you kind of get in trouble, and so we're on good terms with the Yeti, but Japheth is not.
Right. So we'll see. He'll come back probably in another couple episodes here.
Yes.
He'll probably show up in the one right before this one.
Yes. I know.
Because we haven't recorded that one yet.
Yeah, I know.
That could be.
Yeah.
So is it my turn?
It's your turn.
Okay, we're going to talk about Herbert Dickens Ryman.
And had you heard of him before I said that's who you're going to be talking about?
I had heard about him, but I wasn't as familiar with the name. Certainly knew about him, had read some stories about him previously, but he hadn't stuck into my mind until I did this research today, and now he's a man close to my heart, as happens when you do a book report on anybody, I remember the first book report I did on Magellan, so Magellan's one of my heroes now, back when I was in 5th grade or whatever it was. But Herbert Dickens Ryman, his middle name comes from his great uncle, Charles Dickens. He wasn't that close to him,
right.
Not like he grew up in England or anything. He was actually born in Illinois. and was raised in Illinois. He describes I guess I should say, he's a artist, an watercolor and canvas, acrylic and pencil artist. And that's what he did at Disney. But where it all started was in Illinois when he was born in 1910. And he lived there with his large family. He was the youngest child at the time and grew up. And his father was a doctor, but he was a small town doctor, so not wealthy by any means. And his father was an artist, but for practical purpose, his artistry was all to do with anatomy and so on. But it influenced his son, Herbert, or he's also more fondly known as Herb or Herbie. And so Herb was influenced by his father. His parents hoped that he would become a doctor because that's much more practical than being an artist. But I think we're all grateful that he became an artist and followed his dreams that way. His father died in World War I as he worked as a medical officer as a lieutenant in World War I, passed away. Unfortunately, there was nothing from the life insurance policy on it because of acts of war. Was an exclusion on that life insurance policy. So his mother had to get a job in education and found success in that, and where she became the first female superintendent in her county and carried that job for 16 years. So she
Wow.
was able to, again, this is rural Illinois.
Right.
He describes it as there were no distinguishing features, no mountains, not even big trees. It was just cornfields, and never lived in a place with a population more than 500. But his mother was able to provide college, but her and his friends all dissuaded him from following his artistic pursuits. As a young age, he could tell that he was a good artist because when he compared his drawings with the drawings of his friends, he noticed his drawings had more emotions and more details, and he soon realized he had a knack for this. And so he followed his dream, and part of it was because he was sick most of the time he was a child, and so he was forced to live in bed. And so his way of escape was drawing pictures, and when he wasn't feeling well enough to draw, he would imagine in his mind pictures and so on. National Geographic was his friend. His dream was always to travel to places and then capture these places in drawings and paintings so that he could share his experience with others. And so his goal was to travel the world to as many places as he could so that he could share that in his art. His teachers at the first college he went to, Milliken's College there in Illinois, it was mostly a college to where you would end up working in an office desk job somewhere. And his art teacher said, I can't do anything with him. You really need to go to the Chicago Arts Institute. And right about that time, after 1 year in college, he got scarlet fever and was basically sent back home and was sick. And he was talking to his mother when he had like a temperature of 106. And he said, all I want to do is go to the Chicago Art Institute. And she promised that if he got better, she would send him there. And he got better, and she sent him there. He
What a good mom.
graduated.
It's a good mom story right there.
Yeah.
Graduated top of his class. Lots of hope for him, but he graduated in 1932 in the height of the Depression. There was nothing going on, particularly in the Midwest for artists. Very difficult to get a job. His older sister had gone to L.A. to go to drama school, not to their mother's happiness, because again, that didn't sound like a promising career, but she went for a year hiatus from her teaching job to go to this theater in LA. And while she was there, she encouraged her younger brother, Herb, to come and join her there because the economy was a little bit better in LA. And so he went there, tried to get a job. It's still the Depression, hard to do. But she had a friend in the theater that did work, had a friend that worked for MGM Studios. Think of that, MGM Studios, 1930s, bustling place. He said when he went there, because of somebody had mentioned his name, it was quite an eye-opener because it was 2,500 people working, and he came from towns of 500. So it was a very busy place. He met the head of the art studio there, and because somebody had just gone to New York, they had an opening, and he basically ended up being the only art layout artist at MGM Studios at that time. An art layout person is someone who kind of takes somebody's storyboard, stick figure person, and then say, okay, what's this going to look like? How do we build the sets? What's the set going to look like?
He beautified it.
Yeah.
He fleshed it out. He fleshed it out so that, okay, the construction people said, okay, this is what we're building. This is what it's supposed to look like. This is how it feels, and so on. And so he was having to do it rapidly because, again, he was like the only art layout person there. He learned to work fast. He learned to work out quick. He was working on the heydays of MGM Studios, working on movies as our artist for layout on Tale of Two Cities and David Copperfield and Mutiny on the Bounty. And, hey, he worked on the Emerald City portion of The Wizard of Oz. So lots of experience there. At that point, he worked on a movie that talked about Asia, and he thought, I've never been to Asia. And so he'd had enough success, so he decided to take some time off and go to Asia, and took about a year going around painting, drawing that. Came back to California, put on an art show, and Walt Disney came to the art show. And he saw this artist, and he said, you're working for me.
Yeah.
Walt has that ability to like grab people and just be like, you are now mine.
Yeah, it's just like, you are special. I am taking this talent.
Yes, he was able to bring pictures to life. I believe I saw that Walt said about that it made you want to feel like you wanted to be there in his paintings and so on. It had that charm and excitement to it. And so he went to work for Disney, worked on such movies as Pinocchio, and was the art director for Dumbo, and he was the art director for the pastoral symphony scene in Fantasia. He went with Walt and several other artists to South America when they went on that long trip to
Walt
South
and El
America.
Grupo.
Yes.
I'm sure he loved that because it gave him a chance to see another part of the world, having seen Asia and previously had been to Europe. So I'm sure that trip was fantastic to him, and he worked on some of the shorts that came from that. About that time after that, around 1944, he heard that 20th Century Fox was working on Anna and the King of Siam, which turned into The King of an Eye. And having come from Asia, he was interested in working in the art department, developing that, since he had such a fondness for Asian culture and so on. So he left Disney and went to 20th Century Fox, worked there for several years on several big pictures like The King and I and The Robe and David and Bathsheba and other big films. And also during the summers, he was hired by Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus to travel with them during the summers in the early 50s to capture the essence of the circus. This was when the circus was big. Television wasn't big yet. This was, people to see the world either had to go to the cinema, look at their National Geographic, or you went to the big top and saw the animals and everything else, and it was exciting, and that was where it was at. The entertainment for rural America and so on came from Ringling Brothers and Bailey Circus, and he did a lot of painting there. About this time in 1953, Walt Disney is thinking about Disneyland. He'd been playing with it a little bit, throwing a little money kind of behind Roy Disney's back.
Right.
And there was kind of running out of that and had to get either serious with it or not. And so Roy agreed to go hunting for money in New York, and the date was set for Monday. And on Saturday, Walt realized that he needed to have some drawings because nothing was on paper. It was
Yes.
all basically in Walt's mind and heart. And so what did he do? He called his friend Herb Ryman.
Who was
Herb
not
Ryman
working. Wasn't
did
working.
not work for
No.
Disney.
At this time.
He did not work for Disney. So think about that. Walt Disney was working on Peter Pan at this time. He was working on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. He had no shortage.
He had plenty of artists.
He had artists all around him. But he wanted Herb Ryman because he knew that Herb Ryman's drawings drew people in and made them want to be a part of what they were looking at. So he called Herb Ryman in on Saturday, September 26, 1953, and said, "Hey, I want you to come down to my studio and look at something." So he came down and he said, "Hey, I'm going to build an amusement park." Herb says, "Great, that's great. You got anything to show me? I'd love to see it." He said, "Well, you're going to draw it." Roy's going to the bankers on Monday, and we need some drawings. And he says, "No, I'm not.
Right.
You're
That's
not the
like-
boss of me.
I don't work here. I don't know anything about it." He knew from experience that anything really good is not going to come out from Saturday morning till Monday. And he said, "No, I'm not doing that, Walt. I love you, but that's not what I'm doing with my weekend." And Walt
He has a
hemmed
way
and
of-
hawed.
Walt has a way of convincing people.
And Herb loved Walt.
Oh, yeah.
Most everybody
Yeah.
loved Walt, but, finally Walt said, "Well, if I stay here with you, will you do it?" And Herb said, "Well, obviously he really needed this." So I said, "If you stay here with me, I will do it."
And he did.
And he did. And just imagine, this is the first time this is fleshed out. Probably the first time it's come out of Walt's mouth in this detail of Disneyland.
Right.
Just imagine being with Walt Disney.
Imagine the things that he said,
Yeah.
and that were never put down on in the
paper.
drawing.
Yeah.
It's just coming from his heart and from his mind. Just being with Walt Disney at this time, I can only imagine what a special experience. However, when you're under the pressure of, I got to do this and put this on paper
Yeah.
in 36 hours, basically, I'm sure the pressure kind of soured that experience. And yet
Oh, yeah.
it was a magical weekend. They call it the Lost Weekend. But from that came what you've probably seen many times as the first drawing of Disneyland. And it was all done by pencil, and some of the other artists that were there hand colored it with colored pencils to beef it up after Herb Ryman was done with it. And Roy Disney had success with that. There was no problem of the bankers imagining what Disneyland was going to be. And if you look at that drawing, it is very similar to what the
actually came to
Disneyland
be.
we have. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's not perfect. It's not exact. Sure, the Jungle Cruise is on the
The other
wrong
side.
side, but
Yeah.
the seeing two river boats going around Tom Sawyer Island and seeing the castle up the way it is, and Tomorrowland looks pretty close to Tomorrowland, and Main Street looks like Main Street. It was really amazing.
Yes.
And and that came from Herb Ryman interpreting what Walt Disney was dreaming and told him. And that's where Herb Ryman earned his chops to get on a window in Main Street. He was then hired in 1954. He told Walt, "Well, I'll come if you make it interesting." And Walt Disney said, "I promise it'll be interesting."
Walton has
It
a way
will
of
be a journey, I'll tell you that.
He went on to design most of Main Street, Sleeping Beauty Castle, Jungle Cruise. He worked on quite a bit there. Herb Ryman also went on to work on the Tiki Birds, the Pirates of the Caribbean, the New Tomorrowland in 1968. He went and did the first drawing painting of Progress Land, which was
Yeah,
Walt's
right.
interpretation of what he wanted Epcot to be. Um, Basically, if they wanted something to sell something, he was the marketer. He was the one that they got to draw it, paint it, whatever. If they needed to sell something, Herb Ryman was the person, because when people saw his paintings, drawings, they got excited about what Disney was going to build. He retired in 1971 after designing the Cinderella Castle for Disney World, as well as a lot of the President's Hall. But he came back and worked on things like Pete's Dragons. He worked on the Epcot Center, doing a lot of the
A
marketing.
lot of
They
people
were
came
there.
back for Epcot.
America's Journey. He worked on that quite a bit. China, he worked on that one
Oh,
for
I'm
his love from
sure.
Asia. He went on to work on the Indiana Jones ride. He worked on Euro Disney in the early part of it, but he was starting to get cancer at that point and didn't really get to complete that in the ways he had in other parts. He also worked on Tokyo Disneyland, and he passed away in 1989 and was inducted in the Disney Legends in 1990. His window is above uh, the last exit on the eastern side of Main Street as you come out of what used to be the photo studio, the photo store, or what is now a Christmas store.
The holiday shop.
The
Yeah.
Yeah.
the exit that is by the Plaza Inn or by the first aid station, but out of the Main Street stores facing north. His window is directly above that exit. It's for the Plaza Art School, and he's there with three other. Well, there's three names there with that, but that quite an honor. Marty Schuyler said he was the Tinkerbell of the art department. He was always interested in people and in kind of spreading pixie dust among all the workers there, which is, I thought, a very nice tribute.
Oh,
We often
yeah.
hear
Yeah.
that's kind of like what Walt Disney did, you know.
Right.
And to say that about him as an artist, there's some nice features that were done for the Disney Channel early on in the 80s where there's interviews with him worth looking at. I wish I could show you his pictures, but you can certainly look them up and know that he was the guy that sold Disneyland. He's the guy that
Yep.
sold Disney World. There was a book in 2005 that was released that was The Art of Disneyland. It's his picture on the cover. In 2009, there was a book released about The Art of Walt Disney World. It's his picture on the cover. He's the guy that sold it. When I got my first brochure about Epcot from my Disney New magazine, it was his picture on the cover to sell Epcot Center. He was the marketing genius. He brought dreams to reality of visions, to where people could look at it and just say, I want to go there. So thank you, Herbert Ryman.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, wow. You really told a story. I was
You should have
glued in.
finished. I'm
I
feeling bad
know.
about going last now. Uh, but yeah, I know I've been, I know that drawing, the original drawing of Disneyland is considered the Disney company's like prize jewel of their archives. Like that picture alone, like is the most important picture in their archives, because without that picture, the company would not be where it's at today.
It's incredible they let Donald Duck destroy it in the
Right?
50th
Right. Just ripped
Disneyland,
right
right,
through
there
it.
in front of Steve Martin.
Right. But yes, thank you for sharing. I have Mr. Harper Goff. Have any of you heard of Harper Goff before?
No.
Yes, but I don't remember. Tell me
Okay.
the story.
So Harper Goff, let me fix my mic. Kind of have it off to the side here. So Harper Goff, he was born in March 16th, 1911 in Fort Collins, Colorado. he, like a lot of people that end up working for Disney, he was into art. So he went to school in LA for art school. And then he found his way, he moved up to New York, where he worked as a magazine illustrator for Esquire and National Geographic. So
There's that name, National Geographic.
yes. So he did a lot of work there. Eventually, and he actually was very successful in that regards. They kept the way he would portray a lot of the images of locations and how things looked. He was able to translate that well in his animation. Then World War II happens, and he kind of gets while he's working with the U.S. was the Army at the time. He was working on developing a paint by number system. So if you've seen paint by numbers,
Interesting.
Harper Golf right there,
That's cool.
right? But then the Army has him design new camouflage. So he actually designed the pattern of the camouflage that the U.S. Army used during World War II.
Well,
Okay.
And then towards the end,
it's kind of paint by number.
yep,
Yeah.
yep,
kinda.
very much. And then after that, he got transferred over to the Navy, where he was designed to help camouflage their naval fleet. All right, and how do you do that? And I went down a rabbit hole about this. I went a lot longer research about what the razzle dazzle technique
Isn't
was.
that part of a song?
Yes,
Like,
from Chicago. Yeah.
It's like bedazzling, right? It graduated to be bedazzling.
Right. So basically, what this was, and I would recommend you look at it at the razzle dazzle, or just the I think it's just called the dazzle technique or whatever for the Navy, and basically it was a way to help give an optical illusion of the ships, so like the submarines couldn't figure out what direction the boats were facing, so they couldn't figure out what end was the front end of the boat or the back end of the boat, and so they couldn't properly aim as to where they think the ship is going to go when they were trying to sink them. So he kind of helped.
It's pretty cool. You think about like art, and they're like, "Oh, it's a failing like business or a trait," but it's just like people are so creative with what they use it for.
So did he help design the lines at Disneyland to where you think, oh, I'm almost there. Oh, no, I got another mile to
Yeah, quite possibly. No. So, I mean, that was kind of cool. The thing that he didn't invent the technique, but he just was the one that implemented it during World War II for the U.S. Navy. He kind of helped design the different designs for the different ships as to what they were doing. And if you look at it, some of them, they're kind of trippy looking as to what they look like. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting factoid that I found with his life. After the war, he moved back out to California and started work for Warner Brothers Studios and became a set designer. And he worked on films such as Casablanca. Heard of that one?
What?
Yes.
Yeah, he was a set designer for Casablanca.
Come on, I threw out some pretty good names.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sergeant York, Charge of the Light Brigade, A Midsummer Night's Dream, and the Errol Flynn classic Captain Blood.
Ooh, Captain Blood.
Yeah, so he was the set designer for those movies. And then while he was doing that, he got pulled in to do some acting as well. The directors that he worked with thought he had great personality, so they threw him in as random characters. Not really an extra, but like he did some significant acting. He was never a lead or anything like that, but he played roles in a lot of different movies.
Fun.
During that time because of his personality and how he looked. He had a beard, so they cast him as Vikings and things like that. Eventually, one day in 1951, they were shopping at a London model railroad shop. And who do you think they ran into at a railroad shop?
Well, it could have been Walt Disney.
It was Walt Disney. They happened to be trying to buy the same exact train set.
Really?
Yes.
Fight ensued, right?
Oh.
Knives and
I could just imagine like Black Friday status of people fighting, but
and
over
it was just
a
one
railroad.
left.
Yeah.
And it's between Harper Golf and Walt Disney.
Oh.
And who comes out the winner?
Walt
Disney
Disney.
comes out the winner. Because not only did he get the railroad set, he got Harper Golf. So the story goes, he says, he turned to me and says, "I'm Walt Disney. Are you the man who wanted to buy this engine?" And he said, "Well, I almost fell over." He asked me what I do for a living. I told him I was an artist. Walt said, "I've heard of you, but I can't recall where." It turned out Walt Disney had seen some of Harper's illustrations in Esquire magazine. So this goes all the way back to when. And he said he had always admired them, Disney said. He said, "Give me a call when you get back to the States." Ultimately, Walt bought the locomotive and hired Harper to illustrate the earliest concept artwork and renderings for his proposed Mickey Mouse Park. So he was also part of that design process, not necessarily on the same level.
This was more for the one that was close to the studio.
Right. He was kind of helping design the look and feel of the smaller version, the small train park. So, yeah, he kind of came and helped with that design of that and how things eventually developed into what we get into Disneyland, which is funny because he talks about how... and this is like his history with Walt in terms of like, he's like, "Well, I think it should be like this." And then Walt would go, "No, we're not doing it like that. We're doing it like this." And he's like, "Okay."
You don't question Walt.
Right.
I liked what Walt said to Herb Ryman one day, because Herb Ryman was working on something. It was not going well, and he knew it wasn't going well. And Walt happened to walk by, see what he was doing, and he says, "I don't like that." And Herb said, "Well, help me out here. What should I do?" And he said, "Just make something that everybody will like." Just do
helpful.
that.
That's it.
That's
it.
helpful.
That's it. So once he got hired on, after doing some designs, Walt sent Harper on a 3-month information gathering journey to amusement parks across the United States. So he says, "All right, you're going to go around the nation and look at all the theme parks." Because, Walt's never run a theme park before. He wants to see how operations work, how these parks look, to figure out how this park is going to be designed. And he says they were dirty places, and it was hard to imagine what Walt had in mind creating. I said to him when I got back, "Walt, I don't think this is the type of environment that you want." And he replied, "Mine will be immaculate, and the staff will be young and polite." Then I realized he could do it.
Can they still do it?
Right. Can they still do it? That's the question. Orange County was eventually chosen as the site for Disneyland, and Harper, who is dubbed the second Imagineer, envisioned the look and feel of the theme park. Harper used his hometown Fort Collins, Colorado, as the main influence for Disneyland's City Hall, and his art director experience on the film Calamity Jane to design the Golden Horseshoe Saloon.
Mm-hmm.
So he also did a lot for Jungle Cruise, so they probably worked very close with each other. He designed the boats. That's what he did, and a lot of the look and feel of Adventureland. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, he has a fun story about he was also part of the crew that was trying to find trees for Disneyland because, they didn't have a lot of trees when they first began. And so, they were going back and forth from nursery all over the state and, even driving down the freeway and looking at people's trees in their homes and being like, that tree would be perfect. And so, he gives a story of how they found a tree at somebody else's house, and they're like, "We should just ask to see if we can buy their tree." And so they went up to him and says, "Hey, we're interested in your tree." And they said, good, you can take it. It's blocking out the sun. And so they got this huge, immaculate tree for the Jungle Cruise
Wow.
for free because this person didn't
Wow.
want it anymore. They just had to, they took it out and they put in like a flower bed for them. And that was the
Nice.
cost. It was
All
a
right.
flower bed.
What a steal.
So that was kind of a fun story. And that tree is still around. It's at the Burmese temple section. So it's still sitting there.
If he only knew.
Right. He also helped design Haunted Mansion. His original vision was a more haunted, decaying look on the outside, and Walt said, "No, I don't like that. It's going to look nice. The ghost will do whatever they want on the inside. On the outside, I want it to look nice." So, around this time, it was discovered amongst several people there that he played the banjo. And so he was invited to join the Firehouse Five. At the time, it was Firehouse 5 plus 1. And then he became the plus 2. Which is a fun story. I think we talked about it. You had Mark Davis last time, right?
Yes.
So I think we briefly talked about it. They were actually very successful musical group. They got permission from Walt to continue. They says, you still work for me, but if you want to do this on the side, I'm not going to stand in your way. So as long as they got their work done, they could be in the band, and they performed at Disneyland. They were in movies and recorded albums. They're credited to bringing the Dixie jazz music revival back in the
60s,
in the
50s.
right.
Yeah.
That revival kind of came back with them. So that was kind of cool. So also kind of fun story is that he was the set designer for 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Uh-huh.
I got it right this time. I normally say 2,000. I got it right this time. So he was the set designer for it. So he designed the Nautilus, both outside and inside.
Awesome job.
Fantastic job.
It looks great.
So like, and people, and like, if you look at the history of steampunk, they credit the rise of steampunk to these designs of the Nautilus as one of the starting points of that cultural, I don't know how to describe it, but like that desire to experience and see the steampunk style of everything. So those of you who are into steampunk, you can thank Harper Golf for that one. So, but there is a funny story about how he should have won an Oscar, but because he wasn't in the union, he was not allowed to have the Oscar. So it went to his assistant.
Oh,
His assistant got the Oscar
no.
because they had an art direction union card, and he didn't at the time.
Uh-huh.
Oh.
Apparently, later on in life,
They gave
they
him
gave him an
honorary?
honorary. They kind of sent him one in the mail, not labeled or anything like that, but they sent him one and being like, sorry about that, different time.
Wow. At least he got one.
So he kind of went off and on with Disney, but he did a lot of other projects. Probably the one that most of our listeners might remember is he was the set director and designer of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Okay.
So like, the whole candy room with the chocolate river.
The best scene ever.
That was all designed by Harper Goff.
I always love the teacup scene when they bite the teacup.
They talked about that. He talked about that. So like they designed it, and like originally those were wax. The teacup was wax, and he'd have to spit it out. And so they liked him eating it. So they decided to make. Harper's like, oh, let's just make a sugar mold, and he'll just eat a sugar cup. And that's what they're gonna do. So kind of fun. Kind of a fun thing. And he also did like the inventing room, so that crazy room with all the crazy inventions and things like that. Um, he went on. He also, one of the things I thought was interesting, I didn't realize. So we've talked about the World's Fair a little bit here. Again, go back listen to our episode about that. He designed the globe that's still there, the giant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he
Oh.
designed that.
Okay.
Yeah. I was like, whoa, really? That's
That's
very
cool.
interesting. And it's still there today. So like that's something that you can still see in Queens is the giant globe. He designed that. And he wasn't working for Disney at the time. He was brought back on to do a lot of different projects. He was brought back for the Epcot project. He helped design a lot of the World Showcase. He designed 3 countries in particular. What was it? It was I have it copied here. It was he worked on Japan, Germany, and the United Kingdom pavilions. So those were
Good job.
Yep.
Yeah.
Those are
Those
3.
are great
Those are some like the best
pavilions.
looking pavilions, honestly. But then he shortly retired after that. He did work on, as he said, Tokyo Disneyland was his last project before retiring. So he went on and worked there. And he died on March 3rd, 1993. He was given his window in Adventureland. And it's kind of above the shops. It's kind of like if you there's that like random staircase that goes up.
Oh, yeah.
It's like right there.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. I've sat on that staircase.
Yes, it's like right up there. And it reads Oriental Tattooing by Professor Harper Goff, with the lower pane simply displaying the words banjo lessons. So
Fun.
That's so fun.
and I love when we do these Windows episodes. They always they give me the warm fuzzies. I know I was actually like when we was like let's do another Windows one. I was like, oh, those are a lot of work, but I always love this.
It's great to like hear about those that work in the park and their history and their education and their process, because you get to see their side of the career and like, you know, whether they're an artist or a mechanic or whatnot, like they like accomplish so much, and most of it is because of Walt Disney and because he was a dreamer and they were able to help his dream come to life.
So much work went into that park, and and you get to learn about how much work when you read about these artists and artisans and everything they did. It's amazing.
So I would encourage our listeners go and learn more about our Windows. I mean, yeah, we'll probably do more episodes like this in the future, but you know, learn some more about these people because like they've got great stories. Like I didn't know he did Willy Wonka. Like,
Yeah.
and that's amazing.
Especially if that's like your type of career. Like if you're an engineer or if you're an artist, like there's so many good lessons to learn.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I want to thank our Father Yodeler for filling in once again. We really appreciate you, and you contributed great today.
It was fun today.
Yeah.
It was. I feel better this time than I did with our Christmas music challenge.
Well, yeah, you didn't shine on
I did
that
not
one.
shine well on that one, but thank you. Once again, you can reach out to us on any of our social medias, our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can check out our shop. The link is on our Facebook page, so follow us there as well. You can email us at matterhornyodelers@gmail.com. Let us know what you think about these people. Was there something that was surprising to you that you had learned, something new? There was things that I had learned. So once again, thanks for listening. And until next time, auf Wiedersehen.
And don't forget, do what Walt said. Do something that everyone will like.
Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of the Matterhorn Yodelers. Please remember, before your bobsled comes to a complete stop, to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And remember,
Remain seated, please. Permanecer sentados, por favor.